Hello dear students. In last lecture we learned about definition of an operating system and just different roles of an operating system. In today's lecture we will learn concept of open source software and FSF and the history of an Linux. So what is an open source software movement? So this open source software movement this concept comes from free software movement, which is also called as a free software foundation as FSF. Free software foundation, it is formed by the Richard Stallman in late of the 80s. So he launched some products of GNU Linux, which are the free products which is available freely. We can distribute the source code, and also if we change that source code we can distribute that change code also. So these are the features of the FSF. The same features has been taken by the open source movement. So before we should go with this open source movement, first of all you should know about what is an exactly closed software and the open source software. So currently we are using mostly closed software. Means what? For example, Microsoft Windows. Suppose I want to open the code of Microsoft Windows OS. For example, currently we are using Windows 10. Can I get a code of Windows 10? It is not openly available. So it is a closed one. So it is available only with the developers of that particular organization, with the Microsoft only. So even suppose I want to find out the code of Microsoft Word Office, is it available? No. So what does it mean? It is a closed one. So anyone cannot access that particular code. Only that organization, developers, engineers can access that particular programming code. So open source movement is that they have taken the inspiration from FSF, that is a free software movement. Free software movement people thought that this closed concept, it is a wrong one and it is unjust to the people. So the software code should be available to the everyone into the world. That is a basic concept behind free software foundation, and the same concept has been taken by the open source movement. This open source movement has some difference between by this free software movement, because free software movement think that this closed software or this closed software technology, it is totally the wrong one, and they are doing in unethical thing, injustice to the people. But open source movement think that they should coexist with the free software they should exist with this closed software, that is with the, for example, Microsoft totally they are practicing with the closed software technology, that is they are not opening their source code, but currently they are also trying to exit with the open source movement also. So if you go to the Microsoft website currently, then you will see there are ASP.NET having some features of the open source technology also. So open source think that they will exit with the proprietary software also. So closed software, in another terminology we can say as a proprietary software. Proprietary means it is having some owner, one a particular owner, and only that owner will be having source code, and he is having the right to distribute that source code that he is willing to. That is a proprietary one. So it is different, totally opposite concept from the proprietary. So what it says in open source, this source code is available to everyone, that will be distributed to your friends, your colleagues, and suppose I want to do the changes into the source code, that is also possible. So the projects, the software that are following this open source concept, their source code is available to the world. Anyone can change that source code and anyone can redistribute that source code. For example, in yesterday's lecture we started PHP. PHP, it is one of the open source technology. So suppose I want to do some develop some packages in a PHP, that is possible. We can develop packages, we can distribute that package to anyone, to again to the developers of developer community of PHP, and we can redistribute, we can change the source code and we can redistribute it. So that is the basic concept behind the open source. Now when that open source movement was developed, it was developed and it has been formalized with this Open Source Initiative by Bruce Perens and Eric Raymond. So there are three main concepts. Firstly, you can freely distribute the code. You can change the source code, and that change source code again you can redistribute to your friends or the colleague. So that is a basic concept. First, so from this point, what you should understand that what is a proprietary software, what is a free software foundation or free software movement, and what is an source movement. So what is a proprietary software? Proprietary means it is having a one owner, and that owner is having the right to sell that product, uh, then to distribute that product. So there will be one owner. And for the open source, is there any owner? No, there is no any owner. It is the part of total everyone. So anyone can distribute that source code, anyone can change that source code. And difference between open source and free software is that free software is totally against of the proprietary software or the closed software, but open source, it is not opposing that particular closed software concept. It is trying to coexist with closed software or the proprietary software. So I think now everyone got the idea of the open source concept. Now let's see next some examples of open source software movement. So which are the different softwares are belonging to this open source movement? For example, Linux, that we are going to learn, Linux OS. Then Apache. Apache, it is a web server where we can launch our websites, we can host our websites. Then MySQL, it is a database. PHP, hypertext preprocessor, it is a scripting language, server side scripting language. Blender, it is used for 3D graphics. It is one of the animation software. OpenOffice.org, it is same like Office, having every tools just like a word processor, spreadsheet, and the presentation PPT. Mozilla, it is a web browser. Then Perl, again it is one of the scripting language. Wikipedia, that everyone we know about the Wikipedia, that we can get a content and detail of any content from the Wikipedia. So this is about the open software and some examples. Then we will move further to our main point, that is Linux. Introduction to the Linux. So in introduction, first point is that history. First we will let know about what is an history of a Linux, and then we will see the principles of the Linux. So the first there was an Unix operating system. Unix operating system was developed by Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie in 1969 at AT&T Bell Laboratories in 1970. This left picture, he is in Ken Thompson, and the right one, he is a Dennis Ritchie. So they developed the Unix operating system. But the Unix operating system, it is an example of a proprietary system. Just I told you that proprietary system, the source code is not available in case of proprietary. So to this Unix operating system, basically they develop for academic use and for some industry use. So it is a closed one. If anyone outside of that industry or outside of academic want to access that Unix OS, then it was not possible for them. So that there are some trials for developing Unix like system, but that should be a free one. So in 1977, University of California, Berkeley, they developed the BSD, that is a Berkeley software distribution, and they tried to develop the free Unix system. So that was a one attempt. Another attempt is that in 1983, Richard Stallman, he started to develop GNU project to create free Unix like system, which is also called as a herd. So GNU Unix, GNU/Unix, but its kernel get failed or to attract enough developers, and that project becomes incomplete. So GNU is stands for GNU itself. N for not, and U for Unix. So GNU not Unix. But as this is a failed project, so in 1987, Tannenbaum, Andrew Tannenbaum, I think everyone know about Andrew Tannenbaum. Last year you learned C and computer network subject. So there are books are available. He's the author of that one of the book of CN. Also, he has written operating system book. So this Andrew Tannenbaum, he also thought that uh, develop the system like Unix, and which should be a free one. So he developed one Minix operating system and intended for academic use, specifically for the academic purpose. Its a source code is available for was available for that particular academic system, but the modification and redistribution were restricted. Means only he has given the source code, but no one can change that source code or no one can distribute that source code to anyone. So that was a restriction. So another thought, or the same like previously, Andrew Tannenbaum, BSD, and Richard Stallman. The Linus Torvald, in 1991, he was a student at the University of Helsinki, Finland, and he also thought the same to develop academic version of the Unix, and that should be a free one. Free in the sense that same concept of open source movement, that it can be available to anyone, source code can be downloaded, it can be distributed, and we can change that source code also, and change source code also we can distribute to anyone. So that was a concept when he was developing that Linux. Firstly, its name was Frex, but later he has given the name as a Linux. In 1992, its official version, the first version, is released under the GNU General Public License. So that is an official version. So you can see the timeline of a Linux, that actually how development has been begun. Since 1992, first version, official version has been released 0.01, that is the first one. And then onwards you can see the different distributions of the Linux are there. In 1993, Debian distribution, in another one, Slackware, 1994, V1 and version 1, and SUSE at the same time, 1995, Red Hat Linux distribution created, then version 2 released in 1996, then Knoppix in 2000, 2002, Gen 2, 2002 Arc, and so on. So there are so many distributions has been developed till 2015, and so on. So in 2004, mainly in practical we will use Ubuntu, very simple one. So this Ubuntu distribution created, developed, and in 2004 again CentOS also developed.